Welcome to episode 2 of the Men and Community podcast. This week, Matt and Carlo dive into how they define community, how the world we live in today has changed the way we interact with and view others, and why having a garage is killing the community around us. We are so excited to see you here with us again. Let's go.
All right. What's up, everybody? This is episode 2 of the Mac podcast. My name is Matt. This is Carlo. This is why this is the Mac, M-A-C, Matt and Carlo podcast, or the less arrogant name, Men and Community podcast. Really excited for episode 2. In episode 1, we had a chance to come to you and chat a little bit about why we wanted to make a podcast, why we wanted to make this podcast. And we're really, really excited to come back at you. And I know that as soon as we stopped recording last time, we were just so excited, and just both of us just had so much energy with the conversation that we had that we're really excited for episode 2.
Yeah, and I've been slowly editing that first episode and kind of catching all the little comments and quirks we made in between takes. So right at the end of it, both of us at the same time were like, that was so much fun. So we're super pumped to do today's as well. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah, and just to recap, in case you missed episode 1 and you thought you'd jump right to the good stuff in episode 2, the Mac podcast is really about us sharing our perspective as men in community. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to spend time over the episodes of this podcast talking about what we feel our perspective as men is, what we bring as men to community, and really what community means to us. And that's really what we're going to talk about today in episode 2 is how do we define community? What does community mean to us?
Sure.
So just like we did in episode 1, we're going to kick things off with another one of these little cards. For those of you that are listening on a podcast and not seeing this on video, we've got these fantastic little icebreaker cards that have the most random things. And so this time I will draw first. I will read the topic and then we'll see. Woo. Have you ever road raged someone? I mean, yes, but not under the scale of some of the terrifying
the stuff you see on
rage.
YouTube.
Right.
Yeah.
I yell a lot. I certainly wouldn't yell that much if I knew the person could hear me, but sometimes I just wish just a little bit. Okay, so I was leaving the mall on the weekend, and there's this person that refused to just turn, and there were so many opportunities, and I might have thrown my hat at the windshield and yelled a little bit, but not certainly ever gotten out of my car or done anything like that where I would actually confront somebody over their deplorable driving.
Okay, that's good, because the last thing I would want is for you to get into some sort of altercation. I know I personally will talk to that other person as if they are there.
Ah, nice.
But my favorite thing to do, and this is going to label me so horribly, my favorite thing to do is somebody parks like a jerk.
Yeah.
And just takes up 2 spots or is way over to one side or something. I will fold the passenger side mirror in so that they look over as they're backing out and they're like, oh no, that mirror is folded in. How did that happen? And they have to get out of the car to fix it. And my intention is that they will think about the fact that they've done something wrong and somebody intentionally did this to them.
Yeah.
I know that's not what actually they think about, but that's one of my that's my small little revenge on the world for bad parking.
Just a beautiful little moment of passive aggression.
Oh yeah, Gandhi would be proud.
Yeah, wonderful.
Okay, let's see what my card has to say. What's your guiltiest pleasure?
I feel like this is really close to the taboo thing we did.
Yeah, what is this? Are you splitting the deck into 2 parts?
No, I was just cutting the deck, and then here we were. If you wanted to try another card, you can.
No, because just like last time, I think that can be answered in a very nondescript way, I guess. my guiltiest pleasure. My family's Italian. My mom was born in Italy. My dad was born in Italy. And my mom is an absolutely phenomenal cook. You've eaten her food. Probably not recently, though. I'll have to change that. Recently. So I would have to say my guiltiest pleasure is food. for a long time I had a kind of a nasty relationship with food, and I'm past that for the most part. So there are still those days, especially this Christmas coming up here, that we'll have a lot of gluttonous enjoyment of that food, and probably a little too much. So I would describe that as somewhat guilty. Yeah, I would say probably food.
Yeah, I would say mine is probably food related as well. So I have a few poor eating habits. For those of you who are listening again, both of us are fairly larger than average men.
Yep.
Who have for a long part of our lives been even larger than average. And
Sure.
So and we'll get into that more later, but just to set the scene. So like I have some like really weird eating habits. One of the things though that's probably gross, I don't even know if you've seen me do this, is eating popcorn. Like I basically inhale popcorn. Like
Doesn't everybody?
but I like in a like
Where,
by the
like,
handful, and
you
I
can't
just
keep it all in
literally
your
just-
hand as it's going to your face
Right,
or
right,
falls all over you.
100%. So I just like guzzle it into my mouth in a way that's just like super, at least what I imagine to be unattractive. It's so satisfying for me that I don't really care, but that feels like my guilty pleasure.
Okay, like that's totally fair, but again, isn't that how you eat popcorn? You're the kind of guy like me that goes to the movie theater and you can't, you gotta sit there with the bag of popcorn in your hands, taking like one kernel at a time because like the movie hasn't started yet.
Yeah, I can't do it.
I can sit there and I'll be like, just one.
I either eat it all or I don't touch it until the movie starts. I can't just have one.
Okay, so for Christmas, I'm getting you a whole bunch of like amazing popcorn then.
Yes. The dream. All right, I think we're warmed up. Let's dive into it. Again, this is the Mac podcast. This is Men and Community. Mm-hmm. This is Matt and Carlo. And tonight we wanted to talk about community. And one of the things that really, really I find super interesting, especially recently, is to see how people define community. Community can be drawn or defined or set in so many different ways. And so, I wanted to, there's a couple of stories coming to mind that kind of are top of mind. One, because one happened just today. And it really got me thinking about how I define community. So I popped over to the grocery store. I'm lucky enough that I live like a block away from a grocery store. And so popped over to the grocery store to grab some milk. Classic Tuesday night. And right outside the Safeway, this man approaches me really haphazardly, and he's like, "Don't worry, I'm not dangerous." I'm like, "Oh, okay, great." He's like, "Well, it's like this, I was on my way driving from Lethbridge to Grand Prairie, and my wife and I stopped at a Costco, and we got robbed, or my wallet got stolen, and so we're just trying to get gas money to drive back to Grand Prairie from Lethbridge." So for context, we're based in Calgary. Lethbridge is about a 2-hour drive south. Grand Prairie, I believe, is a 9 or 10-hour drive north of here. Yep. So it's a significant amount of time. And so he's standing there outside Safeway trying to get cash retransfers, and I didn't want to have a long interaction with this guy. Usually I wouldn't entertain those sort of things, but something in me was like, you know what? I'm going to give this guy $20. There's a good chance that I'm just getting scammed out of $20, and I recognize that. But on the off chance that I'm actually going to make a difference, that, obviously $20 isn't enough gas money to get him all the way home. But maybe that $20 is the first $20 that's going to get him and his wife home.
Sure.
And I don't know what the chances are. Maybe it was 80% scam, 20% legit. Whatever the case is, I took the chance on $20 to say, you know what? I'm going to try to take this guy at his word, and hopefully this is going to make a difference for him and his wife. And it got me thinking about the way that I define community, which is, I believe that a community is a group of people that have either a social obligation or a legal obligation to care for one another in some kind of a way. And that could be your family unit. Obviously, if we have kids or dependents or whatever that is, we've got a legal obligation to care for that, our family. They become a community of ours. It might be an extended family. It might be a neighborhood. We have, as community members, this obligation to look out for one another in our community. When neighbors' trash cans have been kicked over, or a dog's running off their leash, right? We have these sorts of like embedded social obligations to the people that we define as part of our community. And so, I've heard a lot of definitions, and that's really how I like to define community.
Well, and I think that's a good point, because like if you look at the evolution-based and societal norms of how we used to live many years ago, it's ingrained in us to be social beings, right? Community, there's safety in numbers, there is power and knowledge in having people around you, and that's kind of diminished as time's gone by, purely because we don't need as many people, right? If you think about it, if you needed someone to make you shoes, you had to go in and you had to talk to the town cobbler, right? He was the only one that knew how to make the shoes. Yeah. And whether you got to know him or you treated it as a business transaction or anything like that, you had to have that interaction with him. Now, when you want shoes, what do? You pull out your phone, you buy them on Amazon, right? Maybe you go down to the Sport Check or the shoe store or whatever it is. So we've kind of drifted away from that, but I think at the very core of our beings, this idea that we are social and communicative creatures has never really gone away.
Yeah. Right?
So that's why when the trash can is tipped over, you pick it up. That's why you say hello to your neighbors, right? Not only, hopefully that you were raised to be a kind and caring person, but also because deep down you kind of know that you need that as much as they need that. And I guess that kind of brings me to what I would define as community is any social interaction or environment that affects both you and other people, right? Because you can be affected by outside things just sitting there scrolling on your phone, but that two-way kind of communication, that two-way feedback of each other is unique to community.
Interesting.
Right? So that can be, of course, just like you and I sitting here one-on-one. We are a community of two, right? It can be the interaction with the neighbors. It can be an interaction with a big group of people. And that's probably one of the coolest things about communities. It can ebb and flow in both size and impact, right? So I think that's how I would describe it, is anything that has the ability to not only affect you, but give you an opportunity to affect someone else, right?
I really like that, and I think what to me is really powerful about that, it speaks to the value of social connection. And as you pointed out, we've evolved as very, very tribal beings, right? Community oriented, we're social creatures, we need that to survive, and so just that idea that a community is founded on some sort of exchange of impact or of value, however you want to define it, I think is really, really interesting. What I'm curious for you to think of, and for all of those of you who are like, wow, this stuff must be really well scripted, you must have planned this out. We've planned none of this.
None at all.
So what I'm curious about is, it seems so obvious. It seems like such a no-brainer that there is that value in community, that when I'm able to give something of myself to you and you're able to give something right back, that there's that value proposition. And so to me, the idea of community seems obvious. I also work in community development. Like, this is the stuff that I do. I've worked in community development and recreation for most of my life, and this is what I do. And sometimes I couldn't be bothered to interact with my neighbors, and sometimes we just go out of our way to avoid neighbors, avoid human beings. So, like, why do you think people do that? Why do you think people retract?
Why do we think we avoid? Like I'm no... I'm not trained in psychology or anything like that, so this is just my impression of it. But I believe it's in an attempt to what I would refer to as guarding our energy. Right? So, this is a topic that I talk a lot about in some of my solo content, but it's the idea that you have a very finite amount of energy available to you, and you have to use that in the proper priority. Right? So if you are a person that is outgoing, that is empathetic, that is, extroverted, it is very easy to give too much energy away. And if you are introverted, it just means that you have a much smaller battery to draw off of, right? So sometimes there's those scenarios whether, maybe you've had a really long trying day at work and all of that energy had to go towards making it through the day, that coming home and saying hi to your neighbor and having that one more social interaction, could you do it? Sure, you'd survive, but it would be just that much more draining. And like you said, community is a value proposition, right? So if you're already drained and it is essentially putting you out further to have an interaction that doesn't necessarily bring you any value beyond just the pleasantries of, hey, how are you?
Sure.
Why would you have it? Why would you have that interaction, right? Where there are times, and I know for me, that I gain energy from those interactions, right? This is the argument of extrovert and introvert, right? An extrovert will seek out other people, and in that action of seeking other people and getting to know them and asking them questions and all those things, they get to kind of draw in that person's energy and grow, a little bit along, I guess their passion. Because an extrovert is passionate about people.
Yeah.
Right?
So, I mean, and I agree, but introversion, extroversion isn't new. So why do you think, and again, full disclosure, neither of us are sociologists or psychologists, why do you think that has diminished over the generations then?
Because we get artificial stimulation. We get artificial community, right? You watch a good TV show, and one of the reasons that show draws you in is because you get to know the characters on a personal level. So something that would take a lot of energy in the real world to get to know Matt down the street and all of his struggles and his drama, because drama is juicy sometimes, right? That takes a lot of energy and time investment. Or you can watch a TV show and get it for free, right? So it's that whole argument about what we're going through in society right now, where dopamine rules everything.
Yeah.
Right? Can I get it quick? Can I get it easy? Can I get it now?
Yeah.
Right? That would be why I believe that that's kind of diminished, is that we don't have to look for it in our peers. We can find it elsewhere. Do you agree with that, or do you think there's another reason we might have diminished a little?
Yeah, I don't know. I find this whole thing very, very interesting for a lot of reasons. One thing that we have seen as we've evolved pretty consistently is we've seen people move away from, back to, and this ebb and flow from large urban centers. And, we've slowly brought people together to try to share resources, make the exchange of goods and services a little bit more straightforward, streamlined. And then we move into these cities, and then we try to seek out more space for ourselves. So then we go in and buy bigger plots of land to put bigger houses on, to then distance ourselves from people. And so it's this constant ebb and flow of seeking people and then finding space. One of the things that has come with the rise of large suburban neighborhoods that have surrounded urban centers is the idea of a front garage. And I think I alluded to this a little bit in the first episode. And it used to be the case that everybody would know everyone on the block. You had some sort of shared collective responsibility of parenting, because you can just call down the street and say, can you see little Timmy? Yeah, I see Tim, he's good to go. Great. Well, now, we don't have the same relationships with our neighbors. And I really believe that part of the reason is because so oftentimes we drive home, we drive into the garage, we close the garage, we go into the house. And so there isn't that opportunity, as much as we may be feeling the interaction, having the energy for the interaction at that moment, we sometimes just completely cut that off by driving into our garage. Interestingly, if you look at the research on how far children have been free to roam from their home over the past 4 generations, if you look at our grandparents on average had a roaming distance of around 10 kilometers, meaning that they were free to travel or walk up to 10 kilometers away from their house, come home at the age of 6, I should say, by the
10
way.
kilometers at 6, wow.
Absolutely incredible. And each generation you see that distance shrinking, that 6-year-olds today aren't allowed to travel more than 100 meters on average radius from their house. And I would argue that for a lot of parents, the idea of having their 6-year-old go 100 meters away from their house is probably absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, never out of sight.
And so it's really, really interesting, because the reason why I ask you about this diminishing thing is we get these weird things, phenomenons happening where, you know, our desire to interact with people is at an all-time low, which means we're not going to trust people we've never interacted with, which means all of a sudden, you know, our kids are in a situation where they've got less freedom, less independence to develop into humans that are probably less likely to trust the people around them. You know, and so for me, I think it also becomes this cyclical thing as we pass through these generations, as we become simultaneously more dependent on our inner circle and less independent to be able to seek things out ourselves.
And I find what you're saying really interesting, because I believe that there is a very strong power in wanting good social community, right? Like, you think about this idea that our communities and our familiar units are kind of compacting in on themselves, and I don't disagree with you in any way. Yet somehow we continue to find new relationships outside of those, right? So you think about, you send your kids to school and they're always going to make friends, right? Well, like you hope your kids are going to make friends. Even though that they spend those first, you know, several years of their lives completely ingrained in this familial unit. And unless the mom or the dad has a really close bond with another family that has a kid, that child doesn't really have much for friendship outside of their family until they go to school. Yet we drop them in this classroom and they inherently find someone they mesh with, right? The same can be said for workplaces or hobbies, right? You start a new hobby and you share this mutual nervousness with someone else about, you know, playing, you know, floor hockey at a community center, and the next thing you know, you found a couple people that you mesh with, right? And you form that new bond. And I think that skill set, whether you are extroverted or introverted, is an important thing to develop, right? They say you attract what you are, right? So generally speaking, if you are more introverted, more quiet, you will find someone else that is also kind of like that, right? Or you will find somebody on the complete opposite spectrum that knows how to handle that, right? So even without trying, you tend to attract that kind of thing. So again, I don't disagree with you, but I find it so interesting how even through all of the societal pressure to contract in on ourselves, we still find a way to form good relationships with people. Right? Like I feel like you have to actively try not making friends to actually not make a friend. Now, does that mean that there isn't like some work required, right? Like, you know, you bump into somebody, you mesh a little well. One of you has to say, hey, I really get along with you. Let's go for coffee sometime, right? Or, you know, let's chat. Let me grab your number. Somebody has to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, your relationship will be stuck with just that, hey, we see each other at floor hockey once a week kind of thing, which there's nothing really wrong with. But again, just the fact that this relationships tend to form even when we're not trying to form them, right?
So, and this is really interesting because there's a couple of things going on. The concept of community itself is so big and can be so nebulous and hard to define. I mean, so far in the last 15 minutes, we've talked about community as the exchange of value, a two-way exchange of value from people, the social or legal obligation to care for one another. Now we're talking about shared interest as a source of community. right? So there's so many things, but now we've gotten somewhere totally different. We've gotten into developing relationships, which I know is something that we're both very, very passionate about, and I know will be an episode unto itself. But I guess I'm curious, and this may be something that ends up being relationship driven, but how do you try to foster communities that you're a part of? Like, what do you do to try to either strengthen your communities or to build new ones? Like, what is it that you're actively doing? I'm just thinking, if somebody's listening to this right now and saying, great, like I get it, but I'm still exhausted, like I'm still this, I'm still that, like what is it that you do to try to enhance your communities?
That's a great question. And it's funny that you ask, because I was thinking about it today. I want to be everybody's biggest cheerleader.
I love that.
Everybody's, right? It doesn't matter if I met you 15 minutes ago or we've known each other for 15 years. You tell me about the good, the bad in your life, and I will cheerlead you all the way to thinking you could jump to the moon.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't do that to try, like some people might be listening to this and going, well, that's kind of disingenuous because, you're trying to weasel your way into a relationship with someone because you just say good things to them. One, I'm going to argue with you, dude, let's think about, maybe the brighter side of life than that nepotism, right? But at the same time, I do it because there's not enough of that in the world.
Yeah.
And I gain value from that. I don't care if I have that conversation with you and we never talk again. But if you walk away from that conversation feeling better about yourself, I feel better about myself.
Right.
Because having a cheerleader, even for 15 minutes, can change somebody's life. Right? So I want to be your biggest cheerleader. I want everybody in the group to know I can go to Carlo. I can talk to Carlo. And he's going to make everything we do better. That is how I grow my community. Right.
And I love that you've articulated it like that, because it's almost the evolution of the way that I perceive myself to do what I think ends up being a very similar thing.
Okay.
So for me, the way that I think about growing my community is by making everybody, or doing everything I can to make everyone around me feel safe. And so that might mean just sitting and having a conversation. That might mean making a bigger fool of myself so that somebody feels a little bit more comfortable in their own skin, right? That might mean me choosing to get on a microphone and put myself in a position to try to make other people feel more comfortable using a platform, whether it's myself teaching a fitness class or emceeing an event, right? And it's all... everything that I do is to try to make people around me feel safe. And that's something that's really, really valuable to me. So when you talk about being someone's cheerleader, in order for someone to feel cheered on, they need to feel supported, right? Like that's that same feeling. And it's really interesting because I think that those things are contagious, right? Like you end up creating that system of support, and they're able to perpetuate that, hopefully, to the next person.
Yeah, well, and people talk about that person is the life of the party. Well, they're not the life of the party because, they're the one that drinks the most, or they're the one that has the coolest stories. They're the life of the party because as soon as you get near them, you feel the energy change, right? You're like, if I stay next to this person, I'm going to have fun, right? And what an amazing thing to be known as. Right? If everybody that meets you or somebody is describing you to someone else, well, that's the person that, makes everybody feel great about themselves. That's the person that makes everybody feel safe and willing to try new things. And that is something that I think you're really, really good at, is you have this ability to, like you said, make people feel safe without them really know that's what's happening. So the next time an opportunity to try something new comes up, there's no second thought in their brain. Matt's here. He's got my back. Let's give it a shot. Because if he says, I can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I just find that also this idea of being the life of the party is something that I've struggled with for a long time, and there has been a lot of times in my life where I felt like I needed to be the center of attention, and my thinking on that has shifted a little bit. And so, I do quite frequently end up being kind of the life of the party, but I've thought about it in a different way now. And to me, when I think about life, I think about the heart, right? The heart is the organ that keeps it beating, but
Sure.
we don't always necessarily see the heart or know that it's beating. It's really evident at some points, but not in others. And so for me, it's about creating those environments where everybody, A, is feeling safe, but also B, is having a good time and having the best time that they could possibly have, and what I can do to facilitate that. And that is not always being the loudest, most rambunctious person in the room. And something that a really dear friend taught me is the idea of social space, right? Being aware of how much social space you're taking up in any sort of situation. And that's something that, I've really tried to be mindful of. And I think when we talk about community, it's so important to understand how much space we consume within any community that we're a part of. And does every person have an equitable opportunity to have social space in their community? Not equal, but equitable.
Yeah, and I think that a good way to kind of think about this is that there's different roles that people need to fill in community, right? It's not like we're all fighting for the same space. Everybody has something of different value that they can apply to the puzzle.
Yeah.
So you may have one person that you go to for one feeling and another person for another, right? So you talked about that idea of, it's not necessarily the loudest person at the party. No, because sometimes you might walk into the other room and there's a guy there telling a cool story, and like you walk in and like, oh, yeah, okay, I'm going to sit here for a little bit because this is a really cool vibe, right? So everybody's different, which is neat because you get to recharge those energy levels as you see fit.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I think community, like you said earlier, is just such a massively broad topic that we could go on about it forever.
Or a lot of episodes.
I was just about to say that.
Sorry.
We have lots to talk about. And it's cool because as we've started this little process of recording and filming a couple episodes, we are starting to really discover that we've got a topic here that's almost never ending, which is cool because you and I can talk forever.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. So at this point, we're kind of getting to the length of an episode. Do you have anything major else you want to talk about the core concept of community?
No, I don't think so. Only to say that we really hope that, once again, any of you, whether you're watching this or hearing this, are engaging with us. We want to know how you define community, what makes community important to you, and what topics related to community you'd be interested in us talking about too.
Yeah, there's so many things that we talk about in the span of an episode that to us are just kind of like a background thought or a way to articulate our main point, but that may resonate really heavily with you, and if that's the case, tell us, because we'll explore it further. Because we said in our first episode, this entire process is a learning experience for us. We don't have like some script or episode list that we're running off of, and I'm sure we'll develop something, but we really want this to be a community focused piece of content. So tell us what you're interested in hearing and we'll kind of run with it, because we for me it's all about providing value, right, for everybody. So last week we ended off our episode by kind of doing a little bit of a compliment for each of us, or something that we liked about each of us. So why don't we do that again? I will go first. One of the big things I appreciate you is that you are not afraid to share your self-belief shortcomings. And I know that you do it with me. I know you do it with other people in your community. But you talked a little bit today about having a big worry in your career, and doing everything you possibly could to prepare for this. And then in the end, it turned out to be nothing to be worried about, right? And it was another good opportunity, and you got some great feedback for it. But so many people are afraid to share those kind of shortcomings with each other. And I know that in our relationship, we do it very frequently. And it's something that I really appreciate, because I think sometimes you look at your friendships, and if it's a good friend, you still look at that person, you're like, that's such an amazing person. You almost hold them on a pedestal a little bit, which happens with me, with you sometimes. I'll look at you and like, man, I aspire to be like you. So I'm always going to aspire to be like you in many ways, but at the same time, to know that you and I have the same struggles and we grow together at the same time is very, very nice to see. So I appreciate that about you.
Thank you. Something that I'm feeling a ton of gratitude for you today is how dedicated you are to growing. And it seems like every time we get together that you have this moment or this aha or this exciting thing that you want to celebrate and you want to share, and it all comes from this place, this genuine desire to make yourself better. And what I think is really, really cool is that, you know, we get to live in a world, and I get to be a part of your community where your desire to grow and develop, and, you know, we were talking tonight about some of the personal development goals that you've been able to attain, things that were like pie in the sky. I'd love to learn this when I grow up. And then you sitting back and saying like, you know what, I've done it, I've learned that. And so I just really, really appreciate getting to be inspired by how dedicated you are to growth, and it brings me along for the ride, you know, and in the same way, you hold so much space to be available to other people, sometimes to a fault, but you do so much to be available to other people, and that's something that I am immensely grateful for. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so nice. So nice. Go encourage somebody today, guys. Yeah. Go and give someone a compliment who wouldn't normally have a compliment in their lives. I can tell you, it changes the entire vibe of the day.
Yeah. And think about what communities you're a part of. Think about the groups of people that you care for, whether that's out of obligation or not. Think about the groups of people that you provide value to and that provide value to you. And when you have those groups kind of in that mental, or even if you've written it down in that list, think about what's one way that you can support them, care for them, acknowledge them, and do it today.
Yeah, absolutely. Another great episode. Really happy with how that turned out. And
one of these days we're gonna have to let someone else tell us it's great. We're not gonna have to just decide.
Nah, we can be our own biggest fans. That's fine. We do this mostly for us. No, super happy with that. Excited for the upcoming episodes. We've got some cool stuff planned. Anything else you want to say before we sign off?
Just a little bit of a shout out for our next episode. The plan is, you know, just like any good superhero, there needs to be an origin story. So next episode, we're going to dive a little bit, you know, pull back the veil a little bit on who we are as people, what's brought us to be who we are, and why that kind of impacts the impact that we want to make in the world.
Love it.
Okay.
Super excited.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for today's episode. We're so grateful for you for spending your time with us, and we hope that there was something in today's episode that you connected with, that resonated, and that will allow you to move forward in a good way into the rest of your day, week, and month.
As always, you can reach us on all of our social media. We're on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, all the same at Men and Community.
And if you have any feedback for us, either constructive or positive, maybe you have ideas for a future episode, or even if you just want to share what that piece of today's episode that really resonated with you, please reach out, whether it be through a DM or through posting or commenting on any of our pages. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah. And as always, if you're struggling with something, or you have something that you need to share with somebody as an outside ear, we're always here for you. Both Matt and I are always there to try and provide a little bit of insight and a little bit of guidance. But of course, most importantly, if you're struggling, please reach out to the mental health resources that you have in your community. Those should always be your first stop if you're struggling with something severe.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.